officers of the Council and members of the press and the public, I welcome you to this extraordinary meeting of the Council. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door or through the opposite the lifts in the foyer. Do not use the lifts themselves. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. The proceedings of this extraordinary meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? Thank you. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave this meeting. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of the press and the public from that meeting. And would everyone please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Agenda item number 1. Are there any apologies for absence?
Councillor John Townend.
Are there any more? Thank you. Agenda item number 2, the declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
Chairman.
Councillor Johnson.
At the original meeting of the Save Manston campaigners at the Winter Gardens in April last year, I joined the Save Manston Airport campaign. I have declared that interest consistently throughout. I would like to say that I'm no longer a member of that campaign now, but I had given small donations to help with the hiring of halls during that time. It was a matter of public interest, my membership, and I would like again to declare that I did have that interest, but I'm not sure if this organisation is still active, but I'm no longer a member. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, Manston Airport. I call upon the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We brought to the Council's attention this evening this particular item. It's something that we know has been roaming around the highways and byways of Thanet for many of the last year or more, and announces and comes straight out of the position of the announced closure of Manston Airport, which closed sadly on the 15th of May 2014. We have seen a variety of actions taken by this council and others to pursue how we deal with that situation, and that ended certainly during the course of the last council administration with the cabinet decision on 16th of October 2014, which was eventually considered by cabinet on 11th December 2014, that no further action be taken at the present time on the CPO of Manston Airport, on the basis that the council has not identified any suitable expressions of interest that fulfil the requirements of the council for a CPO indemnity partner, and that it does not have the financial resources to pursue a CPO in its own right. And that secondly, that subject to obtaining written consent from Party A, relevant information is sent to the Minister of State for transport for consideration. Now, at the time, I think most of our attention as councillors was focused on the first of those recommendations, but in the reality of recent months, it was the second of those recommendations that actually seems to make a difference to the circumstances that we face right now, in that the transmission of information from Party A to the Minister of State for Transport led to certain pronouncements and announcements by government. It led to the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, which is due to report within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And it led to government ministers actually coming down to Fana during the election campaign and stating that they felt that the indemnity partner status had effectively not been fairly judged by the Council's process. As such, I think it's fair to say that sufficient change in circumstances has taken place for this Council to recommend that the Cabinet, who are the decision-making body in this regard, should perhaps look once again at the situation in regard to the indemnity partner status, and that to do so as the first action of this new Council is in line with much of what was discussed and what was pledged during the election campaign by both ourselves and the Conservative Party locally. As such, I would thus like to recommend that we approve recommendation 4.1, that this Council recommends to Cabinet that it reviews the position in relation to the Manston Airport site, taking account of all the surrounding circumstances relating to an indemnity partner for a possible compulsory purchase order. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Bacon.
Second and reserve the right, Chair.
Thank you. Do members wish to debate or do members agree?
Well, I wish to debate. I have questions I'd like to put through you, Chair, to the Leader of the Council, if that's okay. Congratulations, Councillor Wells, on your election as Leader at TDC. Now, I would like, however, to put some questions to you through the Chair that actually come out of an interview you gave last Sunday on the Sunday Politics show. When asked about the proposed CPO of Manston, you replied, and I quote verbatim, Chair, "If we pass the public interest test, and if the money is there from River Oak, we go ahead." Now, prior to the election, there was no ifs, no mention of a public interest test. Statements were made by now your UKIP councillors that there were no ifs or buts, but that we were going to reopen the airport. Indeed, it was the lead issue in your leaflets, and of course that was prior to the election. I can now see that after the election it seems that the mood may have changed considerably. But perhaps more importantly, however, is what you then went on to say. And again I quote verbatim from the interview you had on that show. And you said, "If we do not pass the public interest test, we at least have a position of strength to negotiate with the new owners what they want to do with the site." Firstly, Councillor Wells, through the Chair, can you please explain to me why failing the public interest test strengthens your negotiating position with the new owners? For I would have thought that that would have considerably weakened it. Secondly, I personally do not know in any great detail what the new owners do want for the site. Well, they certainly and surely do know what they do not, and that is an airport. I know this because they have categorically repeated this, said this on many occasions, even putting it in print. So are you now admitting to your members, to the opposition, to the supporters behind me, that in these circumstances you will negotiate the fate of Manston's site that does not include an airport? Fourthly, before the election there was specifically no plan B. Well, I think there certainly is now. Is this plan B for backsliding, plan B for backtracking, or is it just plain plan B for when, as he knows, and as he has always known, plan B for when plan A inevitably falls?
Councillor Campbell. Councillor Wells.
Apologies.
There's been a very long, quite bitter at times, election campaign, at which many things were said and many things were thrown in relation to this as well as other aspects of all that were in manifestos and policy documents. And as Councillor Campbell well knows, there is laid down within the legal processes for a compulsory purchase order, not that we are at that stage yet, but there are within the legal requirements of a compulsory purchase order various things that we actually have to do. One of those things is to talk to the owners of the site. One of those things is to try and encourage the owners of the site and the possible indemnity partner to talk together to see if we can reach a negotiated rather than a legally forced settlement through a compulsory purchase order. And as leader-elect of the council and now as leader of the council, it is my responsibility to ensure that we do nothing in the early stages of any process such as this that places us at risk through those processes by looking as if we had utterly prejudged the issue en route. As such, I have done nothing more than actually place on record what may happen at different stages in this process. And we all know in this chamber that the key process within the CPO will be the public interest test. I was asked a question about what may happen if we fail that. I gave what I felt to be an honest answer. And whilst I appreciate the advice, I would have to point out, Councillor Campbell, that it was your administration that put this council in a position of weakness from day one on this subject. And we are trying to restore that with an even-handed, open and transparent approach to this, which was surely missing from what happened before.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The papers before you obviously outline the timetable of what happened and the closure of the airport on May the 15th last year. One of the first things that I did as the leader of this council, and I was elected to be the leader on that day, was to arrange to contact Mrs. Globe, the then owner, to see if she could be persuaded to change her mind. But she didn't, and there is some element of truth in the fact that maybe she never intended more than briefly to run an airport. That is a matter for others to decide. When the campaigners, and I was one of them, supported a petition to the council to ask for a CPO, the then chairman allowed us to bring that petition to the council despite the fact it wasn't quite within the time. And that came on the 10th of July. And I quite rightly persuaded Councillor Bob Bayford to support the resolution that I had on that evening to go forward with this. We said we couldn't afford to CPO ourselves, but we would look perhaps for an indemnity partner. That was something we decided on the 17th of July. On the 31st of July, we then had our cabinet meeting to go forward. And by the end of August, we were expected to have responses to questions that our 151 officer and our then acting chief executive and others had prepared to go out. River Oak was the only company that came forward out of, I think, 5 who showed any real possibilities. Throughout all of that time, from the end of August through to the 16th of October, I met with River Oak, I spoke to the new owners, I spoke to everybody possible to get them to work together within the rules of the council. And we had a progress report on the 16th of October. And we could have that night said we're not going to go any further, but we were very keen to continue to see what could be done because of the concern and the importance, and personally for me, the economic regeneration of Thanet I felt needed another opportunity. I had immediately, as when becoming leader, written to Sir Howard Davis in support of what he was trying to do about the need for an airport expansion and capacity requirements in the southeast. I also, with our officers, sent a submission to the Select Committee in that September outlining the importance of the need for further capacity in the southeast and to see if Manston could be considered. That was done by this Labour-controlled council, and every councillor was invited to come in and read our submission. I think 3 councillors came and read that submission, and 1 member of the public asked to read it. By the 11th of December, on the morning of the 11th of December, I met with John Hayes, the Minister, Secretary of State, in London with Sir Roger Gale and Laura Sandys to discuss what we could do next. And I was asked if we would allow our papers to go forward, which we did. The Department of Transport, I'm sorry, you must hear this, sat on those papers from the end of December to the end of March, and then asked if they could send them to Price Waterhouse. And I have it from John Hayes himself that they hadn't actually read the papers before they sent them to Price Waterhouse. So a commitment to reopening the airport based on not reading papers, which John Hayes himself told me, is not right. We were told we would have Price Waterhouse report by the middle of May, and we have not had it yet, and they haven't once contacted me. The criteria for the council is, I'm sorry.
Johnson, thank you very much, but could I ask you please to wind up?
Thank you, very quickly.
Thank you.
And the criteria for the council is very strict, and Councillor Wells should know this. 3 years' accounts, not money paid in stages, and obviously money that we can check where the money has come from. That was the reason for the decision in December, because the criteria of the Council must ensure there is no money laundering. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Matterface, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question through you, please, to Councillor Wells. On page 2 of document 3.1.1, under Financial and VAT, it says, any decisions taken regarding Manston Airport by members will need to take account of any financial implications for the Council. Could I please ask Councillor Wells, what might these financial implications be? Because obviously we need to give some consideration to that before a decision can be made. Thank you.
Councillor Wells, would you like to respond?
My understanding of that will be, and I'm sure I'll be corrected by officers if I get this wrong, my understanding of that quite simply is that the process for appointing an indemnity partner is to indemnify this council against all costs and therefore all financial implications of the compulsory purchase order process, and it is that in which we seek an indemnity partner for, and that in which we seek to an indemnity partner who has the financial clout to make it happen.
Councillor Grove, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll take this opportunity to congratulate Councillor Wells on his appointment, and also your good self and your Vice Chair. I must say it's nice to be back, if only a small voice in the wilderness of this vast gladiatorial arena that we have here. I have always supported Manston Airport as an airport, not houses, empty industrial units, schools or any other farcical enterprise. It is an historic airport and must remain as such. But as a council, we must be absolutely sure it will not be to the cost of Thanet ratepayers. This is the point that concerns me, and we must make 101% sure that whatever we do is sound and will not put this council or any member of the public in danger. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this proposal, who hasn't spoken? In that case, may I turn please to Councillor Baker?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. I can't see any point in going way back to July of last year, because it seems to me that we've got a very, very straightforward situation here. The controlling group here were very clearly elected on the promise of delivering a CPO on Manston. There were no ifs and buts. Councillor Campbell's right on that. There were no ifs and buts about it. And in fact, Nigel Farage used Manston very prominently in his general election, and was promising that, you know, the plane would be flying out there in next to no time, and the only party that had it in their national manifesto. So I think you know, you can't, to use again Councillor Campbell's words, you can't backslide and backtrack on that. That's what you were elected on, and the people out there expect you to keep that promise. We support the pursuance of the CPO, and we will vote in favour of the motion before us tonight. But I would like to remind people out there that the Conservatives on TDC were the first group to have a definite formal policy in favour of a CPO at a time when UKIP were actually divided right down the middle, totally divided down the middle. I would also remind you that both Thanet MPs, actually neither of whom happens to be Nigel Farage, have been in total support of bringing Manston back into use as an airport. And we've had, as has been mentioned before, an unprecedented number of ministerial visits in support. There is a willing indemnity partner waiting in the wings. I'm surprised they've hung as long as they have, but they are still there. So I urge you, Councillor Wells, keep election promises and just get on with the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Wells, could I just ask you please, very briefly, to clarify again the proposal that you bring before us, and then I'll ask you if you would formally second it.
It is the recommendation 4.1 on page 2 of the agenda this evening. The Council recommends to Cabinet that it reviews its position in relation to the Manston Airport site, taking account of all the surrounding circumstances relating to an indemnity partner for a possible compulsory purchase order.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Thank you very much. And do members agree? Thank you very much.
We have a show of hands, please.
There are members of the public here who expect tonight that the leader is going to move to CPO the airport. They voted for that. Oh yes they did. Oh yes they did, because they've been contacting me.
Councillor Johnson, thank you very much. I am advised that having already spoken, you can't re-speak to this matter. But as for But there was a question, could we take a vote? So could we please have a show of hands, those in favour of the proposal? Please keep your hands up for a moment while we count.
What a picture! All I can do is thank you, Mr. Campbell, for destroying the Labour Party. Gary. Hey, well, I hope you did hear it. I had a twat heard it and all.
Thank you. Are there any who oppose the proposal?
This bang.
Are there any abstentions?
Yes.
Thank you. The proposal is carried. Thank you very much. That concludes the business for this extraordinary meeting of the Council. Thank you very much.
Well done, sir. Well done, sir. Brilliant.
It will. You know.